Hi, thanks for watching. Okay, in this video, I want to talk about an issue that is specific to people who actually are diagnosable, people who actually have narcissism showing up in the form of what I think is mental illness. Okay, so in this video, I'm just going to talk about, kind of more on the mental illness side and dealing with recovery, okay, because I think recovery is very challenging. Um, and recovery on the mental illness side, and focusing on what I think is sort of like the very essential element of cluster B disorder. Okay, and so getting below all the layers of all the DSM symptoms, and getting below even the kind of universal narcissism that will show up more exaggerated in this condition. Okay, I want to get like right down into like the machine language of like the neurology as I see it. Okay, kind of like our limbic reactivity, and what is basically the you know sort of like the basic situation that we as diagnosable people are dealing with. Okay, now in my experience, it's sort of really kind of three things. Okay, it is irritability. Okay, sensitive irritability. All right. It is also okay. It's irritability and it's reactivity. Okay, irritability and reactivity. Okay, now to sort of make that irritability and reactivity, sort of to have the irritability sort of translate into flash reactivity. Okay, sometimes very very quick reactivity. Okay, I think there's another aspect in there that I'm not sure exactly how it's related, but I feel like, at least in my neurology, I feel like the signaling that sort of like kind of like takes up all my attention basically when I'm activated. I see that as like a noise signal. Okay, it's like a noise signal, and so I would say noise signal flooding. Okay, now I don't know if that's exactly connected, like in the same mechanism as the irritability and the reactivity. I think it's probably like a third element, but I think it sort of feeds into the kind of like the transition from being irritable to being reactive. Okay, so somewhere in that chain of events, which is a very fast chain of events, it's like a chain reaction. I believe, at least in my case, the noise signal, which I'm assuming is the amygdala. If it's not the amygdala, it's just whatever signaling is sort of like occupying all the attention. The noise increase basically. So I would call it noise signal. Basically, it's noise signal flooding. And sometimes you're not even aware of it because it's not a noise that you can hear. It's mental noise. It's sort of like it's the thing that causes you to sort of slip into something, okay? And it sort of like just floods your mind and sort of gets everything out of the picture, basically. So I call that noise signal flooding, okay? So basically, if I had to pick like two elements that really, really capture the cluster B experience, it would be irritability and reactivity, like flash reactivity, okay? But then somewhere in that chain, you got the noise signal flooding, noise flooding. Okay, so it's basically, I'll call it three elements. It's, irritability, noise flooding, and flash reactivity. Okay, so like I said in the previous video, and I'm going to say this again, I do support, and I think it's so important to have insight. Okay, I think insight is absolutely important. I mean, if you're gonna explore the hills, you got to know the hills. You got to have a mental map of the hills. You got to know your territory. Okay, for us, the hills are this cluster B neurology. And you have to have insight. I mean, so like I'm not going to ever discount insight. I think insight is absolutely crucial, but I think that because our the like these mechanisms in us, our irritability, our reactivity, the noise signaling, and all that, I think that is so deep in our limbic neurology. I say limbic metaphorically, okay, but it's so deep in our limbic neurology that insight by itself does not actually control the behavior, okay, because the behavior gets initiated at a very limbic level. It's sort of like go ahead and step into a cold shower. Okay, put your shower at like the coldest you can get it. Okay, and you step into that cold water, and you tell me if you can control how your body sort of tenses up and stuff. That's kind of like a limbic reaction. Okay, or like say if you're someone who has sexual instincts, like say if you see very good-looking people, okay, tell me that you can control your instant reaction to seeing an attractive person. If you're sensitive to that, maybe not everybody. Or let's say if you're the kind of person that walks by like a barbecue place and you smell this fantastic food, you tell me if you can really control that instant reaction. I mean, we're talking about, and if that's not your thing, think of something else, like whatever is your thing, but like I use the cold shower because that's like, you get yourself in a cold shower, okay, and your first reaction is that tensing and all that, and you try to make yourself relax. You're dealing with very limbic reactions, okay. Um, so um, so the problem is that those limbic reactions will always trump your understanding and awareness. So understanding and awareness, that's a first step, okay. But understanding and awareness that's not translated into like a system, sort of like a program, sort of like a, I don't know how to say it, like a scaffolding or like some kind of structure, so that you're already anticipating how you're going to react, and you already have like a structure built around your anticipated reactions. Okay, so at some point, the insight is nice and it's key, but it has to be implemented into a plan. And I believe it has to be like a comprehensive daily, always for the rest of your life plan. It's not like, I'll do this for 6 months and then I'll sort of like take away the structure. I think, in my opinion, I think our limbic programming is so deep and it always trumps our understanding. And it's just so insidious that I think we're like the addicts. I think we're like the people recovering from addiction, that we need, I believe, like a life commitment, and knowing that it's not a bad thing. I mean, it's like a lot of people say, "Oh God, if I have to have a constant program, it's like then I don't even know if I want to live a life. This disorder is too much for me." It's like I think people ought to give it a try. People ought to experiment with having like a real plan in their lives, like a real structure. Because if you're really committed to it as like a life commitment, you know, yeah, it's a little bit tedious. Yeah, life's going to be a little harder than it would be for another person. A little more, I don't know, like a little more structure than most people live with. But if you just get used to it, it actually, I think it makes life a lot better than it would be. So we're talking about the possibility of a real improvement. And I think this is very similar to what we see with drug addiction recovery. The idea of a drug addict in recovery, they understand they're going to live with their problem for their whole lives, and they just accept that they need to always go to their meetings and always do their things. Maybe I don't buy into like the religious side of it, the higher power and all that. I think that's unnecessary. I think it's just the sponsorship where you have people that are a little more advanced, that are a little more experienced. That sponsorship is so important because it's sort of like it motivates you. You see how somebody farther along, they really are living a better life. So it's proof that it's worth it. You need that proof. You need to feel the proof that this is worth it. And then also the peer support where you have other people that are at your same level, because that just kind of it reminds you that you're part of a group that has the same interest. Okay. And so it's sort of a combination of the sponsorship and peer support. And then the idea that you're going like several times a week and it's a very regular kind of thing, working your steps, whatever, or, reinforcing that program and knowing you need that program. Because unfortunately, all that stuff they say about the powerlessness, I'm powerless. Well, see, we have that too in cluster B, where it may not be exactly an addiction, but the limbic reactions, the limbic programming is so insidious that there's no amount of understanding that can trump it. The limbic reactions and the limbic programming will always trump our understanding. Okay, so in that sense, we are just as powerless over our condition, regardless of our understanding. We're powerless over it. Okay, and I'm here to testify, man. I have a bad temper. I get real reactive. I get real frustrated. I slip into fantasy. I slip right in. Although I'm better now, but it's because I have structure. But it's powerless because it trumps just your cognitive awareness. It's limbic. It's limbic reaction. Just like I'm powerless over just as much stepping into the cold shower, how my body reacts. Okay, so you know, um, looking at it like that, I envision that whoever comes up with some futuristic hopefully sooner than later. But whoever comes up with a real good plan for cluster B, I hope it would look like something like CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, sort of fused together with something like very analogous to the drug addiction's peer support, kind of community, where you go to meetings like 3 or 4 times a week, or maybe more, whatever, knowing that you have to always have a program, and that it's just not enough to have the insight. I really believe that, because we're talking about these limbic programming. It's like we are programmed way below our cognitive executive awareness. Okay. So here I want to talk about again the irritability and the flash reactivity. So it's irritability, reactivity, and then the noise signaling. Okay, that noise flooding, drowning. The noise is drowning your brain. It just occupies all your awareness, and it just sort of just takes you to another place. So like I've been talking a lot about the dialectical stuff. How our basic irritability seems to really revolve around sort of an intolerance of dissonances, okay, and always kind of slipping into a more simple state of mind where we're just kind of unplugging from all our dissonances, and just kind of slipping into a better place, where a better place is basically out of touch with everything around us, including people, and also I think we idealize the escape. Okay, and because the escape is deeply embedded in us, is an ideal of a better place, a better self, a better world. Right there, we start to get the envy, because when you see people in the world, if I see, like, say, a good-looking, attractive person, I'm going to say, oh, that person's like a piece of heaven. They're like from heaven, and instantly I'm kind of thinking they're from a better place, and it kind of pulls at your envy. And that whole dynamic of envy, like who's in a better place, it's all based on this idea of the idea of a better place, who belongs to a better place, a better race, a better social class, a better quality of person, just this, it kind of, that idea of going to the better place is already establishing this idea of like a hierarchy of, what's better, what's worse, and the kind of like the envy spectrum, Anyway, but so yeah, there's that escapism that's very tied together with the intolerance of the clutter and the dissonances of just normal living. Okay, and so the irritability and the reactivity is sort of tied into in one case, at least in one aspect, to that tendency to want to kind of escape into our own world, into self-absorption, even when we're not aware of it. Okay, even when we're not aware of it. So, it's kind of like when you see a dog in their dog bowl, or like a gambler sitting at the gambling table. You just kind of get absorbed in that world, or just somebody watching sports on TV. You just get caught up. It's kind of like that, but it's sort of like in everything, but even if you take away that issue of the escapism, which is so important, if you just get down to the machine language, okay, of the limbic reactivity, and just look at that irritability and that flash reactivity, okay, even though your main problem might be fantasy and escapism, it also shows up in like a flash temper, like your temper just blows up, okay, and I get, it's frustrating to me, because I know that the psychoanalytic people, they always want to come up with a story as to why you're so angry. Why do you have that narcissistic rage? That special rage that only narcissistic people have. And it's because you're so angry because what, blah, blah, blah. It's a story, But the bottom line, whatever the story is, and there may be some truth to it. I don't know. Maybe not. But the fact is that we have that flash reactivity, okay, and the noise signaling, okay, so that probably the reason why our moods are so intensified and why our anger is so intensified is probably just the mechanisms of the neurology, just probably the overflooding, the flash reactivity. Those probably produce, more exaggerated anger and more intense anger states. That for other people, it's like, why the hell is he like that? So they come up with a story, and we're always going to come up with a story. How was my father? How was my family? And yet, again, there may be some truth to it. But whatever the truth or falsity of those things, at this point today, my neurology is set up the way it is. Okay, whatever the reason. Okay, so I don't know that it helps us to focus so much on the reason, because whatever the reason, this is the neurology I have right now. okay? And however it is, okay, whether you got a story behind it or not a story or a symbolism or a mythology or, a psychoanalysis, the bottom line is, my noise signals are very loud and quick, okay? I honk the horn fast and my horn is loud, and my reactivity is fast, okay? I have a very flash reactivity, okay? So these are basically limbic situations, limbic configurations and limbic dynamics, and just the way our software is set up and the way our hardware processes neurological signals, okay? So that regardless of the story, I've got to deal with like basically an engineering problem, okay? And I know for some people that is like nauseating. It turns people off in our soul, that in a sense we have to kind of look at ourselves almost like in an engineering perspective, okay? And believe me, I'm as poetic as anybody, okay? I really am as poetic as anybody. I have a soul too, okay? And my soul is real. But there is a certain aspect of engineering that we have to just, I'm sorry, but it's the question, the problem we have does come down to some amount of engineering, okay, some structure, okay. And I'm sorry how much that hurts people to hear that. I think engineering is just a turnoff, it sounds so inhuman. But we have to have a little bit of a logistical kind of an engineering attitude about this, because it's part of how we take care of our soul, okay? It's not a contradiction of the soul. It's not a denial of the soul, but we have to have some housing and some structure around the soul, so the soul can be in a better place, okay? Um, so the soul can be healthier. And so, in my opinion, we're looking at really, just one way or another. And this may be the real insight for cluster B. It's not whether you agree, and it's not whether you accept that you have the DSM symptoms, okay? But it may be something like, do you, like the addict, accept that you're powerless over these deep limbic programs, okay? Powerless over these mechanisms, and that just by having understanding, you're not going to be able to control it. Okay, just having an executive intention and in some executive awareness, you're not going to actually be able to control all these basic limbic processes. Okay, and so then if you admit that I cannot control that, okay, then you go to the next step is I need a program that is bigger than just my understanding and my efforts. Okay, that to me is probably closer to the real insight, um, that would actually constitute a useful insight that would actually get somebody in a direction where they're willing to accept that it's worth it. Yes, I'll be adopting sort of the equivalent of like a mechanistic kind of engineering program around my soul, okay, which is no conflict with the soul. It's no contradiction with the soul. Yes, I will be adopting kind of a pain in the ass, tedious, whatever, but maybe not too tedious, but some structure, okay. But that the benefit will be that my soul will then be in a place where I will not be doing things that make me feel bad about myself or make other people feel bad. So, in my opinion, I think it's worth it. And I think if people had sponsors or examples in their community where they could see people who are more further along, that would prove to them that it is worth it, or at least for some people. Maybe for other people, this what I'm saying doesn't make any sense. I understand that, but at least for some people. Anyway, so what I want to talk about specifically in this video is, what I've talked about before with the dialectics, this idea that if we can start to introduce things that we normally tend to avoid, okay, what is our basic escapism? Our basic escapism is not really, there is no real heaven. There is no real ideal anything. Okay, that's all just fantasy. Okay, but what are we really escaping? We are actually escaping something. We start dissociating, we start unplugging. Okay, when we are in our escapist fantasy, we do start unplugging from the dissonances around us. Okay, the actual kind of pesky mosquitoes and just pesky, tedious things in our life, and how other people are doing, that's all tedious. Just dealing with other people. I have to deal with all the being in the herd of people and all their interests and all. It's tedious. It weighs on you. It taxes you. But the thing is that sometimes it's worth it to pay a tax. Some taxes are bullshit, I admit, but some taxes you actually do get benefit from paying the tax. Okay. And I think sometimes what we don't realize in these cluster B is we're habituated to not paying a lot of taxes. We sort of unplug from the taxes of our environment, okay? And we don't even have a chance to experiment and to try seeing if there is some payoff from paying some of the environmental taxes. Okay, so there's so many environmental taxes. I don't even know where to begin. It's like having constant consideration for how other people are feeling, how other people think, for just for consideration of other people, how they're doing. Um, just like say just mundane little things like just dealing with things in my life, just logistical things. Also like when I have like a decision to make, like weighing all the factors on whether I should or shouldn't, the pros and the cons. Sometimes we like to eliminate all the mosquitoes of the pros and the cons because they're just like mosquitoes, they're just pain in the ass. But sometimes it's better when you're thinking of an issue like say the war in Ukraine, or like say some big political thing. Why don't put more factors, more issues on the table, and really load the table down, so it takes us longer to have to go through and really meditate and really kind of almost like process, like metabolize all those things, sort of organically. But the bottom line is this: like more issues, more taxes. This taxing my attention. It's taxing my psychic peace. Like I can't be at peace because I have to deal with all these issues. But like a certain level of environmental taxation, I think, has benefit. Actually, it's worth it to pay those taxes. So think of it as like a taxation scheme. Our environment is full of things that can tax our attention, that can sort of occupy our mental space. And that, although it goes against all of our habituation, and this is maybe our addiction, if you want to say we're habituated, okay? It goes against all that. It actually, some level of environmental taxation is actually worth it. It's actually beneficial, okay, to the people around us and to us, okay? So basically, that's where you get into the dialectics. The dialectics is taking on the environmental taxation and not trying to process it, just being taxed and letting the organic dialectic just naturally metabolize that burden, the burden of all that environmental taxation. So it's just burden assuming. We assume the burden of all the dissonances, all the extra factors. When I have to make a decision, instead of just thinking of 2 or 3 factors, I could think of 12 factors, just adding more weight, adding more dissonance, admitting more dissonance, and replugging into all the dissonances that we normally unplug from, because we're just constitutionally, we're just so intolerant of all that clutter and all that dissonance. So we have to kind of readapt, and that takes a program because we're not naturally suited to that, and it's not even our instinct. We have to really have people around us. We have to have a program and really a commitment that we're going to replug into all these things, and we're going to assume more environmental tax, basically. Okay, taxing our attention, taxing our irritation, okay, so that we can slowly get readapted, or adapted for the first time to a little bit of a heavier load. And believe me, it goes against our nature totally. So that's why we need the program to help reinforce it, because we ourselves, we cannot maintain that. It's impossible. And I'm a living proof. I can't do it by myself. There's no way. I need a program. Okay, I can just say that right now. Okay. So, and even the program that I've adopted is very imperfect, and even then I could way improve it. So I'm on the road. On the road to recovery as well. Anyway, so basically, my question here is that if I have this really steep slope of reactivity, like my reaction is like it's like a flash. So my question is it possible for, let's say, this dialectical burden, if I assume the dialectical burden, the burden of environmental tax, okay, by assuming that, can I sort of like change my slope of reactivity? Like, because here's the problem I have, no matter how good the program is, when I start to get really provoked, sometimes my reaction is so instantaneous. I ask myself, through this recovery, can I actually maybe change my reactivity so that I become, a less reactive person? You know, and the bottom line is, I think yes and no. Okay, I think I probably will always have the neurology where my brain will always tend to get flooded, and where my reactions will tend to be kind of flash reactions. Okay, but I also think that if we look at the slope of our reactivity, okay, it's kind of like the slope of a mountain. Okay. And because I haven't had a program in my lifetime, okay, most of my lifetime has not been programmed, has not been with any deliberate, attention. And like say, I haven't, I haven't really had a lot of time in my life where I've had like a systematic, kind of like say a program to deal with my behavior, So basically, neurologically, up on that slope where I get real reactive, my brain doesn't have a lot of education, doesn't have a lot of learning on anything except reaction. Because once I get on that slope, all I do is react. So I don't really have, my brain is not really learned. I don't have any real training on that slope. You see what I mean? So where there's no training, okay, there's always the question of whether you can put some training on the slope so that, like say, at different levels of reactivity, we could experiment with different processes. Like say, let's say I'm half angry. Like say I'm up on the slope of being real angry at somebody, and I could already say, I already lost because I'm already angry, but I'm not really at full anger. I'm sort of like halfway up the slope. Maybe I could start practicing like really with support, maybe with a peer support, with a sponsor, going to meetings like every couple of days where I really am committed, where every time I get like halfway up the slope of anger, I can sort of not like stop myself. Like I don't believe in like suppression, but I could just kind of take a breath and just feel bad and just feel like shit and like this is fucked up, but just not get to the full rage, and just start introducing some learning where there has been no learning before. Because I believe the brain is trainable. Okay. Not to say we'll change our temperament, but I think at different points in the slope of reactivity, I think we can introduce experience where there has been no experience prior. Okay. And that experience will induce some level of habituation to the brain. Okay. Now, at the deepest limbic level, I mean, we're going to react to things. Okay. The reaction is like going into the shower. Okay. We can't change that. But once you're on that slope, I think we can introduce some sort of like artificial, I say artificial, but like we can start introducing like methods and techniques to sort of kind of take a step back, take a breath, sort of like don't ride the roller coaster all the way to the top kind of thing, where we start developing like our own kind of like our intuitive methods, okay, to just kind of build a little bit of experience on the slope where we're doing something other than just slip all the way up, you know? And the same thing could be said for somebody who has trouble like watching. Some people. I think a lot of people with cluster B fall into addiction. So like say the addiction of like just wanting to watch TV all day and just do nothing. The addiction of just wanting to buy Kentucky Fried Chicken because I don't feel like chopping vegetables. Just that kind of thing. All these little things. When you get that little slip where it's almost like a temptation, like the temptation to watch porn. Or just to do something just a waste of your time. Really just a waste of your time and not good for your brain. Just all these little slippy little temptations, whatever. The best place to learn is when you're already feeling pulled out, where you're already feeling pulled towards something, like already half angry, already half maybe about to watch a porn video or I'm about to purchase like some terrible junk food or just stupid things, or, just all the things that we do. Or let's say I'm a narcissist, so like I'm about to fall into this kind of momentary fantasy where I'm just going to start imagining having a super successful business and just going to fall into it. When we're like halfway up the slope, maybe we can start introducing just some take a breath, sort of change the subject, not suppression, but just kind of interrupt it just a little bit, not suppressive, not fighting it, but just kind of change the mixture a little bit, sort of play with the stew, add some black pepper, maybe add another vegetable, just take a break, even just take some time just to feel frustrated, you know. And I think slowly, what we'll do is we'll kind of we'll sort of put terraces on the slope, and we'll sort of add just learning, because whatever the brain has experience with, like repeated experience, that does get into our what we're able to use in terms of behavior. Okay, where there's no experience, you're hopeless, but where you can add experience, that learning, we're actually adapting. I think, not the deepest programming, but this is like, kind of higher level programming, not foundational programming. Okay, the deep limbic programming, the deepest programming, I think we're totally helpless. I think that's why we need a structure. Okay. And so I just encourage people, to consider, whether we should really, really endorse and really just explore more,